Good morning. I think it's about 10:15, so we'll go ahead and get started. Clearly, I'm not Carol Engel. Carol is off at the annual meeting of the Catfish Farmers of America, where she's on the Catfish Farmers of America board, so it's an impossible day for her to be gone from that meeting. So I'm going to give her talk. I'm also supposed to talk a little bit more about fish health and biosecurity. So what I've done is kind of stuck my talk into the middle of Carol's talk and made it all into one big talk, since there's no official starting and stopping times in the program anyway. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started a little bit. There's a picture of Carol, so you remember what she looks like. A lot of you will recognize her. Well, Arkansas aquaculture is really important, and a lot of people don't realize how important. But I think it's safe to say that when it comes to fish, Arkansas is pretty much the leader, and for a lot of different reasons. If you look at the impact of our aquaculture industry on the economy, the farm gate value is about $167 million a year, and the economic impact then is over $1.2 billion. And in a study that Dr. Engel did looking at the economic impact of catfish farming in Chico County, Arkansas, it's almost half of the economic activity in that whole county is tied up to the catfish industry. And I have a picture of Chico County later. Another thing that's important about the aquaculture industry in Arkansas and throughout the Mississippi Delta is that it's focused in those areas where folks are the poorest. Right? This graph, the dark red, is where the poorest people live, and our aquaculture industry is home in that same part of the country, so it provides jobs and income for people in a place where there aren't many jobs and good jobs. So it's important, not just the total value of the industry, but its location. And the best thing about aquaculture fisheries in Arkansas is just how diverse it is. If you look at our aquaculture industries, we don't just raise one thing, we raise all kinds of things. We have the world's largest goldfish farm, and that's an impressive step. I think it's probably the world's largest. It's certainly the biggest in the U.S. And that farm doesn't raise many of these really fancy varieties of goldfish. What they primarily raise are these feeder goldfish, which are very boring, but you see them in pet stores and fairs and everything else. And this farm ships them all over the country to Petco and Walmart and PetSmart. So Arkansas supplies almost all the little orange goldfish you see all over the country. This then is Poole's Fish Farm in Lone Oak, where a lot of those goldfish come from. We have several huge farms. Poole's produces, they admit to 300 million goldfish a year. Now, I know the veterinarian from PetSmart, and according to him, he can account for this many, so I don't know how many they grow. That arrow is pointing to the main holding building at Poole's, and there's two tiny little white rectangles right at the tip of the point. Those are two FedEx trucks, 18-wheelers, that are being loaded up with the goldfish to go to Memphis to hit the FedEx trucks to go all over the country the next day to PetSmart and Petco and Walmart. And this is the back room at Poole's late in the afternoon, and these are the boxes that the fish will be shipped in. This is one day's worth of boxes, and we have two farms that pack between 500 and 1,000 boxes every night, and several that are in the hundreds. So there's a whole lot of goldfish that leave Arkansas every day. There's a guy with the blue ices down in the bottom. They have a really sophisticated shipping system to get the goldfish everywhere alive. We raise some other things too, some koi, which are ornamental fish that are sold all over the United States. They go through the same PetSmart and Petco kind of routes. What we're really famous for is bait fish. We have the biggest minnow farm in the United States is also in Arkansas, so it's probably the world's biggest minnow farm. And it's Neil Anderson's farm up in Lone Oak. Now, altogether in Arkansas, we have about 30,000 acres of golden shiners being produced, and 4,000 of those acres are on this one farm. Now, we had to switch from the airplane photo to the satellite picture to get Neil's farm in here. That's the rough outline of the farm, and if you try to look for trucks and things on his farm, somewhere at the end of that red arrow is the corporate offices, a building with 100 and something raceways in it, and probably several trucks, but it's all so small you can't see it anymore. Along with that farm is the biggest fish hatchery in the United States, and the number of fish that are hatched. He hatches 1.2 billion fish in a 6-week period in the springtime. This is about a third of the hatchery in this picture. These blue tanks are all full of mats, fiber mats covered with shiner eggs, all standing in there on edge. And this is technology that was developed by Dr. Stone here at UAPB. widely used on the big fish and farms. Anderson's Farm will even FedEx your bait to you overnight. If you want to go fishing this weekend, you call him up and it arrives at your home on Friday by the FedEx truck, so you can go fishing over the weekend. Don't even have to go to the bait store. So it's the home of the flying fish now. Now, altogether, Arkansas produces something like 80% of all the farm-raised bait sold anywhere in the United States. So there are big trucks going all over the place from Arkansas every day. Most farms own several trucks this size, and you can see it's an 18-wheeler. This is Saul's farm, I think, and 2 of the 18-wheelers under the shed. If you sit at the stoplight in Lone Oak, Arkansas, you'll see a truck like that go by about once every 5 or 10 minutes. A really important part of that industry is the bait fish certification program, where those bait fish are certified by the Department of Agriculture to be free of some nasty things, and that helps them to move through the supply chain all through the country. And I'm going to mention the certification a little more later when I talk about fish diseases. All right, we are second-ish in the U.S. in catfish production. Of course, the catfish numbers are a little tricky right now because the catfish industry has shrunken a lot in the last few years due to competition from China. But the catfish industry is, the biggest state is Mississippi, and Arkansas has always been second. Alabama will sometimes claim to be second, but the truth is that they are processing some of Mississippi's fish and counting them in Alabama, and that's not fair. So we're definitely second in the U.S. catfish production. This is a picture of Lake Village, Arkansas. So the circle is around Lake Village over there on the banks of the river. Right? And if we go and highlight where there's catfish farms in this picture, all those red areas are catfish ponds. And you see, if that's the whole city in the circle, you can see how much catfish there's been in Lake Village, and it has a huge impact on the economy of that county and of the state. We have lots of other cool things. We have the world's largest striped bass hatchery. And this would be Keogh Fish Farms in beautiful Keogh, Arkansas. That's an aerial picture of just a little piece of Keogh Fish Farms. But in those buildings in the upper left, there's a very sophisticated hatchery in there where they produce a big percentage of all the hybrid striped bass grown in the world and in the U.S. and a lot of the ones that are grown in other countries.
Where's Keogh?
Keogh, just north of England, between England and Little Rock. Another, 10 miles north of England, something like that. Yeah, right near the Toltec Mountains. Mm-hmm. Another big product of Arkansas aquaculture is grass carp, especially sterile triploid grass carp. And these fish are sold all over the country for weed control. And the very good news is for every one of those sold, there's probably a whole bunch of aquatic herbicides that don't end up in the environment. So the grass carp have a huge impact. They were originally imported back in the Rachel Carson's Silent Spring part of history when people were tremendously worried about herbicides and agricultural chemicals. And the grass carp are a neat control for aquatic weeds that doesn't take chemicals. And the ones from Arkansas have 3 sets of chromosomes, and they're sterile, so you don't have to worry about them reproducing in the wild. We have the world's largest largemouth bass farm in Arkansas. And you think of largemouth bass as being a sport fish and sold for fishing. But in Arkansas, we produce a lot of bass as a food fish. So this is a picture of a Chinese market. This is New York, not Korea or Japan or China. And the Oriental folks like their fish either freshly killed on ice, like those big head carp in the foreground, or else the bass they like still swimming in an aquarium. And both on the east and west coasts in Canada, it's largely Arkansas that supplies the fish to those live markets, and that's where a lot of the bass go. Now this is just one of the hatchery buildings at Dunn's Fish Farm. All those raceways are full of little fingerling bass, and the bass are hard to feed train, and they got to be fed at really short intervals. So those 3 ladies are circulating between the buildings feeding baby bass about once every 30 minutes all day long. Most of the sport fish that are sold in the United States for stocking people's farm ponds and backyard ponds come from Arkansas. And there's some other big distributors in Ohio and other states, but most of the fish that they're selling are actually being born here in Arkansas and then go through those other distributor networks in other states. So we raise most of the sport fish. This is a J.M. Malone and Sons webpage, another Arkansas farm with a really glitzy webpage. But they sell sport fish fingerlings all over the country. We even have sport fish fingerling farms where you can order the fish on their website and put them in your shopping basket, and it comes to you by FedEx in a few days. So We have a few other strange things that you don't think of. We don't have, shrimp kind of comes and goes in a cycle. Right now we have just one farm in the northeast part of the state that raises these freshwater shrimp and sells them at their own store every summer. We have some crawfish here. The crawfish aren't in their native habitat, but we sell, crawfish production's not really big in Arkansas anymore because the labor requirements, and it's pretty unpleasant labor involving a lot of mucking around in the sunshine and snakes, but most of the crawfish come from Louisiana, but we do still have several crawfish farms. Oh, turtles, things you don't think of. Arkansas is a major exporter of turtles. We raise both the red-eared sliders that you see at pet stores and snapping turtles that are sold as food animals. And a lot of the snapping turtles from Arkansas actually make it all the way back to Asia, where they're grown up and sold for food. So we're a turtle exporter. And there's a ton of trout produced in Arkansas, but most of those are not on commercial fish farms. They're produced by the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission and by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So we have lots of trout. And my one favorite trout picture kind of is a transition here. This is a brown trout from the White River that was in the disease lab one day because things got a little hot a couple summers ago and they lost a few of these big trout. It's a 32-pound trout. And that's a good transition to talking about natural fisheries. And that's a wild trout. Natural fisheries are really important in Arkansas too. And if you look at the crappie fishing and bass fishing and catfish fishing, the economic activity involved in that is huge. And we have some folks with some largemouth bass fishing. We have corporations in Arkansas like the Ranger Boat Company. Their whole market is bass fishing and sport fishing. So it's really important to the economy that way. There are literally thousands, a fair number of bass tournaments in the state. Yeah, thousands of competitive bass tournaments in Arkansas every year. And all those bass tournaments cause people to come from out of state or around the state. They stay in restaurants, they stay in hotels. So it's really important to the state's economy too. So we have all these really important wild fisheries and have this really important aquaculture industry. And somebody has to take care of all that and provide teaching and research and education. Right? And that's what the Aquaculture Fisheries Center does. So we have the classic land-grant university kind of mission. Teaching, research, and extension. That's what we do. And we integrate them all together to help solve the problems of the folks of Arkansas. Now, figuring out what we should be doing is always an important thing. Where do we put our resources? Where do we put our efforts? And we listen to a lot of different folks. We listen to the catfish farmers of Arkansas. We meet with them. They tell us what they need. We meet with the Arkansas Farm Bureau. They tell us what their farmers need. The Arkansas Bait and Ornamental Fish Growers Association, when they meet, like they did last week, they tell us what they need. We left the meeting with a to-do list. The Arkansas Game and Fish Commission, it lets us know what help they need with natural fisheries management. We listen to pond owners, private pond owners through the Extension Service primarily. And then the Arkansas Catfish Promotion Board. So we work really hard to make sure we know what our stakeholders' problems are so that we're addressing what they need to have addressed. We even get a lot of input on the national level. So Dr. Engel is off at the annual meeting of the Catfish Farmers of America right now, and we get a lot of input from them. We have a national steering committee that meets every few years that gives us advice on what to do. And we also work very closely with the National Aquaculture Association. Now we collaborate with people all over the world. Our nutrition folks work on projects in developing countries where they help folks to produce more food to eat. Our marketing and economics people have collaborations all over the world, and their primary goal is to find new markets for Arkansas fish and to help Arkansas fish to better compete with foreign fish. So they collaborate with folks all over the world. Disease Lab, we collaborate with folks all over the world also, both for latest information on fish diseases, diagnostic tests. We send viruses and bacteria and DNA samples somewhere on a weekly basis by FedEx and often overseas. All right, so the teaching, research, and extension thing. We'll look at teaching a little bit first. We have bachelor's degrees in aquaculture and fisheries. There's a couple of the undergrads out on the Arkansas River where they've been electrofishing for largemouth bass. And here's some more of them. This one's getting old. Out in one of the streams collecting fish with one of the graduate students. Here they are. We emphasize hands-on. Right? And this is the undergrads in a lab as part of one of the biology of fishes class. They're all doing experiments in one of our laboratories. And we also have our students working with us in our research labs to get that kind of experience. Sandra Hairston here is now with ADHE. And we also have master's students. We have a master's degree program. And here's some of the master students and an undergrad or two working on what's probably one of Dr. Engel's catfish studies, out here in the pond harvesting fish and sorting them and weighing them and measuring them. And then our master students include foreign students, and that's a neat thing because it's, for a lot of our undergraduates, really the first time they've had a chance to interact with people from other countries on a daily basis, and that's been really good for the undergrads. That's Rebecca Lockman, our nutritionist, working with Praveen from India. We are also working on a PhD degree, and this is my own adaptation of Dr. Engel's hurdles slide with the animated catfish. But the Arkansas aquaculture industry wants us to have a PhD program at UAPB so they can provide them with a higher level of research that PhD students can do and more professional people to fill spots that need to be filled. So it's been a long process. The first thing was to get our house in order in UAPB and make sure that we had the facilities and the faculty that we needed to do it. Then we had to convince the UA system that it was a good idea for UAPB to have a PhD. In the newspaper last week, the Arkansas Department of Higher Education voted to change the role and scope of UAPB to include PhD programs. So that was that next hurdle. After that, there's another site review coming up where they'll come and visit us and evaluate the PhD program in fisheries itself. And by, I think Carol's math, that's the 6th or 7th site visit, something like that, related to this. When we're done with that, all we have left is our accrediting agency, and hopefully we'll be done. So we're working on a PhD program. It's been years in the making, but we're on the home stretch now. All right, teaching, research, and extension-wise, let's talk about research for a minute. We have lots of natural fisheries research going on. We have a big boathouse down at the station full of electrofishing boats and electrofishing equipment and trawls and nets and people coming and going. Okay. We have the research center that's at the UAPB station. It's surprising how many people work at UAPB don't know that this is just over the hill on the main campus. There's what's the official number now? 13, I think. 113 ponds on our research station. So it's one of the largest pond research stations in the United States. We got research, lab research, and all kinds of things. Fish health and nutrition and hatchery technology certainly is known nationally. Production, economics, and marketing, Dr. Engel and Dr. Day are always doing studies to figure out better ways to help farmers move their products, market their products, and produce them more efficiently. Let's talk about extension for a little bit. The traditional role of the extension person there in the middle is to serve as an intermediary between scientists and farmers. The farmers have problems. They tell the extension specialist, who explains to the researcher what the problems are. And the researcher does some science and figures out some answers, and tells the extension folks who are supposed to help the farmers to implement that kind of thing. So they're trying to get the farmers' needs to the researchers and the research results back to the farmers in a way they could use them. So that's the traditional role of extension. And we do a lot of that. We have yield verification programs where we take all the extension recommendations for catfish and baitfish production and check and make sure they work in the field. So we're on farms weighing and measuring and making sure that what we're telling folks to do really works. A lot of work in hatchery management, which covers a broad part of the research that we do, that we help farms to figure out how to manage their hatcheries more efficiently, produce more fish. Farm pond management is important in the program, and you'll hear more about that from Dr. Stone if you hang out for his talk later. But there's all kinds of work that private pond owners need for assistance for managing ponds, and also some publicly owned ponds that we help with. We have some pretty good educational events. I don't know if they're our teaching part or our extension part, but Aquaculture Fisheries Aquatic Sciences Day happens every single fall. This last year we had 600 and some odd high school students visit us for the day. And we change our research station into like an educational fair with a midway, and the students can wander around to all these different educational exhibits and do things. Here's some of the high school students. It's like Watson Chapel there with one of our graduate students looking at something. Do you know which one this is? Otoliths, so ear bones in fish. Here they are watching a how to harvest catfish demonstration. So it's a pretty good crowd of students and really interested in what's going on. We work in other places. I'm dissecting catfish with the Conway High School students here. And this is where I'm going to stick in a little part of my talk about the disease parts that we do. Right? So I kind of fit mine into, this talk usually has a disease part in it. I just made it a little longer for today. But what we do in fish health in Arkansas is pretty important. We have 4 laboratories that are overseen by UAPB. One's in Lake Village, one on the UAPB campus in Lone Oak and in Newport. Together they do about 2,500 cases a year, and the lab at UAPB will see fish from about 25 different states in a year. So this is the busiest fish disease diagnostic system in the United States. No other state does that many cases. And our laboratories have several different jobs: disease diagnosis, disease prevention, and also inspection and certification. I'm going to look at them a little bit separately. Disease diagnosis. Fish get all the same kinds of diseases that humans and other animals get. Parasites, viruses, bacteria, funguses, toxins, anything that can go wrong. Right? So we have to be set to diagnose all those kinds of diseases. I just put in a couple pretty fish disease pictures. Nothing that'll be bad right before lunch or anything, but this is a single-celled fish parasite called a trichodina that lives on their gills, and they're like little donuts with teeth and they swim around. They're really pretty. They'll stop a catfish from eating. If catfish get covered up in those, they quit eating. This is a bacterial disease. That's a fish scale, and those little stacks on it are stacks of columnaris bacteria. They're the only bacteria that really look cool under the microscope. At the top of the stacks, those little fingers are all waving like this. And if one stack starts getting bigger than the neighbor's stack, the bacteria will leave it and migrate over and build up the stack next door. They even make little bridges. This is a viral disease that koi get. So you can see those fleshy pink spots on his head. That's called carp pox, and it's really a herpes virus. And it looks ugly, but the good news is it goes away after a while and the fish is all right. This is my only example of a neat fungus disease picture. This is a fish gill, and you can see this thing right through here. That's a fungal hypha all full of spores, and that's infecting the gills of a fish. And they even get cancer. Yes, fish get cancer. This is a golden shiner with a big tumor on it. And this tumor's got a name about this long, but it's the only one ever reported in fish. Our laboratories, in order to diagnose all these diseases, we have to be fully equipped with all the things you'd find in either a hospital lab or a big vet school diagnostic lab. So we've kind of got the whole CSI DNA thing going, right? When you're watching those crime scene shows on TV, right, it's a whodunit, but the whodunit is a criminal, right? In our lab, we're using the same DNA and the same instruments. Actually, we're ahead of the TV shows. But the same DNA and robots and the same instruments to do a whodunit. But in our case, the whodunit is a virus or a bacteria or a parasite. So we can test. It used to take us a month. We can now do in a few hours. And we develop new tests using these technology that are all used around the world. Disease prevention is an important part of the role. I mean, we work with the farmers. You've seen this picture. But to help them prevent disease outbreaks, and we do it in all kinds of settings. Here we are in the laboratory where we work on the disease treatments and testing advice that we give to the farmers and learning about diseases that are giving them problems. This is Gwen at one of our DNA testing PCR machines looking to see if a virus is present on a farm so we can know if prevention is warranted. We do a lot of educational prevention things too, biosecurity education. This is one of my favorite pictures because we're all in these silly Tyvek suits, but I'm at the vet school at Ohio State University training veterinarians about fish disease so they can help farmers prevent diseases from coming onto their farms. All right, then the inspection and certification part of the project is really important. And farms in Arkansas ship their fish live, interstate and internationally. And all of these different states and countries have their own fish health regulations. And sometimes it's a Department of Natural Resources, sometimes it's the Agriculture Department. But there's all these sets of rules and all these inspection requirements, and the fish have to be tested. And in Arkansas, all the fish come to UAPB to be tested. And it's fair to say that none of those fish that are leaving Arkansas live would be leaving Arkansas anymore if it wasn't for fish health inspections. This is the entrance to our laboratory on a typical fall day, and those are all bags of fish stacked up, ready to be cut up and tested for viruses. This is the all-star fish necropsy team that we employ this season. I have 6 undergrads working for me, and they cut up fish, they process samples, they do cell cultures. All the steps in virus testing they can do, and they can do it without direct supervision. Right? Farmer can come in with 150 fish, I can say, Raphael, these need to go on 2 cell lines for virus, and I can walk away and come back in 2 hours and they'll be good to go. So they're pretty neat. We have the same picture on a poster in the laboratory now, so that when visitors come, they can see the teams. I mentioned part of that inspection is the state certification program, especially bait fish that end up in the wild in other states all over the country. Departments of Natural Resources worry a lot about diseases and aquatic nuisance species that could be in those bait fish. So working with industry and the Department of Agriculture, we developed a certification program now, and it involves disease testing and testing for invasive species and lots of biosecurity and third-party oversight. But Arkansas farms that belong to this voluntary program can ship their fish all over the country with far fewer regulatory hassles than other bait fish farms would have. And they are also now marketing the safe bait from Arkansas as a brand name. And you see them on fishing shows, and soon it sounds like in magazine ads. Right, meanwhile, back to Dr. Engel's talk. We were somewhere in extension, and I was showing you this model of extension where it's farmers between the researchers, the extension between the farmers and the researchers. Well, nowadays we're faced with, it seems like almost a daily regulatory issue of some kind that has the potential to cause big problems for commercial aquaculture. And a lot of times those discussions don't go really well because the academic folks, say Fish and Wildlife here, the folks at Fish and Wildlife don't really understand the aquaculture industry. And the aquaculture industry doesn't have time to sort through all the jargon from the agencies. And in between, they tend to forget about the scientific parts of things. So our job is to help explain farmers to agencies and agencies to farmers and try to get them all to think about science and the decisions they're making. So with Asian carps, they're in the Great Lakes, they're a big problem. Some of the rules that are designed to help that problem, though, can cause harm in other places. So we worked a lot on that issue. Effluents, the EPA wanted to regulate effluents coming from fish farms. It had the potential to be really damaging to our farms. And the truth is the water leaving those farms is in most cases cleaner than the receiving waters they're going into. So we had to work with the EPA and the farmers. I work with a lot of agencies on disease regulation issues. Catfish dumping and the food, FSIS, and Catfish Food Safety Inspection Service is going to start inspecting catfish coming into the United States to make sure that they're safe and wholesome. And apparently that rule just came out today, so there'll be, I suspect that Dr. Engel, wherever she is, will be filling that role in the middle real actively in the next few days. So our extension folks nowadays have this much bigger role, and I think industry appreciates the new role as much as they do the old one, or maybe even more. Just the last couple notes about our faculty. There's Dr. Engel teaching her class. But, amongst our faculty, we have 2 former presidents of the U.S. Aquaculture Society. We have 3 winners of the National Aquaculture Association's McCraren Award, which is the most prestigious assisting the aquaculture industry kind of award in the U.S. I have the little asterisk that Dr. Engel's actually won it twice, and I don't know if I think she's the only one that's won it twice. And presidents of associations and things like that were very active on federal advisory committees. And I think it's fair to say that if there's a National Aquaculture Committee or a task force, somebody from our faculty is probably a member of it, and maybe the chair. So we have to keep an eye on all the regulatory things to help the farmers deal with those. Some that we're proud of, the National Aquaculture Association is the national association that a lot of species-specific or regional aquaculture associations work under. And the National Aquaculture Association is now got its home right on the UAPB campus. They moved there a couple years ago. So the biggest National Aquaculture Association is in S.J. Parker. And with that, I'm done. I had just like a couple more minutes. 15, we've got 20. Yeah, I'm going to blow 2 more minutes. I have another couple slides. I don't know what's for lunch today. Maybe, hopefully it'll be catfish. I'm not sure. But I like this. Dr. Stone and I have been touring the country with the National Aquaculture Association trying to educate fish farmers about aquaculture and to try to address some of the bad press that they get. And it turns out that misinformation on aquaculture is just amazingly widespread. So here we have the quiz question: which has more PCBs, wild salmon or farm-raised salmon? I mean, what do you hear about on the news? Yeah, you hear about the farm-raised on the news for sure. This is the official graph, right? I heard Dr. Lockman mention it doesn't matter, and that is actually the truth. This is the worst case scenario for farm salmon, a very biased sample. The wild one, the projector's not showing it. It should be just a little blue stripe right there. That's the best case scenario for wild ones. This is the FDA limit for how much PCB can be in food that you eat. Right? So it really, maybe there is more in the farm, maybe there's more in the wild. It just doesn't matter. As a matter of fact, if you look at this handy chart from the Seattle Post, here's the salmon right here. They've got it at 26 parts per billion. This is chicken breast at 32. You never hear about PCBs in chicken breast or in brown gravy or butter. So it's just bad press. Here's another one. What's the FDA fish consumption advice to pregnant women? Almost everybody in 10 national meetings, almost everybody came up with some fairly strict version of pregnant women shouldn't eat fish, and that's not the advice at all these days. The FDA thinks pregnant women should eat fish a couple times a week is a good thing to get your omega-3s that the developing baby needs. That you should probably avoid high mercury species, but these are not the species of fish that are raised on fish farms. You should emphasize low mercury fish, which are all the ones raised in U.S. aquaculture. So, mercury, eat more farmed fish when you're pregnant, and it's good for you. And then I have just one more question, and I've stolen parts of one of Dr. Stone's slides, but does it matter where your fish come from? In the United States, when you go get that catfish, it came from your friendly neighborhood catfish farmer, and his business is regulated by a zillion different agencies. They're going to make sure that his product is safe and his practices are sustainable. Right? He has FDA, USDA, Fish and Wildlife, everybody looking over his shoulder to make sure that he's doing the right thing. And if you go to other countries, the regulatory structures are not as well organized, and you don't know for sure what's going on. This is the Mekong River, and those buildings out there that look like houses are actually fish farms. Inside there's cages with the fish growing underneath, and they're feeding the fish a ground-up mixture of things, which historically has included a whole lot of marine fish harvested from the wild. So just when you're looking for safe and sustainable, and you see those certification things in the grocery store, remember the U.S. farm-raised one is overseen by the federal government. And with that, I'm done.